Okay, everyone, at this time I will open the January 6, 2021 Southampton Planning Board meeting. It's also televised on channel 191 on Easthampton Media, and all members are present this evening except for Dan LaValle. So our first order of business is an A&R that was submitted by John Martin for 106 Clark Street. So here I go, Cindy.
You want me to do it?
Let me just try this, okay?
Yep.
We've got Maureen wants to enter, so I'll do that first. Is that showing?
Just your file page. The actual document's not open.
Yeah, I don't know what I do not get this opening.
You have to double click and open it before you even start, and so that it's open but reduced on the lower end of your screen. That's the way I've been doing it. So if you want to stop doing that and X out of that, and then I can share screen.
All right, go ahead.
Well, you can't. You have to close out.
All right,
okay.
Go
there
for
we go. Let me try it. So where is it? Downloads. Planning board, clean draft, board. I had it open myself and it's not showing up. This is the application. Well.
The application and the plan were on the same.
Well, here's the application. That's not what you want though, at this point. I had it open before the meeting. Let me try here again. Okay.
Cindy, go to the top of that screen with your cursor.
Yeah. Oh, there it is. Got it.
There you go.
There we go. Okay. Thanks.
Okay. So would you just scan that up a little bit, Cindy?
Yep.
Okay. Is John right there somewhere? John, you turned on?
I'm here.
Okay. Would you explain what you're up to now?
Yeah, on this we have, I guess, roughly 7¼ acres. We were planning on selling the house with 1 acre, but we found a buyer who was interested in more of the land, basically the land along Clark Street. So we want to separate it into those 2 parcels. So when we sell the house, we'll sell it with 2.75 acres instead of 1 acre. That's what this indicates.
So you are subdividing in, is it lot 2 is going to remain open, correct?
Yeah, lot 2, and that was assigned 67 High Street a while back, remember?
Okay.
We looked at, yeah. So yeah, that's gonna remain open.
So on Clark, what are you creating then?
We're creating a lot of 2.75 acres.
And that was taken from lot 2?
It was all 1 lot.
I'm confused because you said there was an A&R that was previously done for lot 2?
Yeah, well, what happened is I wanted to split it up differently and just have 1 acre for the house. We went through the A&R, went through planning, and gave the plans to Martha Leamy. What I didn't know at the time is that I had to give it to our attorney to file in the Registry of Deeds to make it official. That was never done. So when I talked to her on that, she said, well, it was never done, so it never really happened.
Okay, so that clears it up then. So the previous A&R is, you're just negating.
Yeah. Right.
Okay. So you've got plenty of frontage there.
Yep.
And any questions from Cindy, Paul, or Keith?
Well, I have one procedural question. If we already approved an A&R for a different size of Lot 2 and Lot 1 was a different size, do we have to have two motions, one being to, no longer acknowledge the previous A&Rs, and then these are the newly created A&Rs? I wonder if there's two motions required.
Well, since the other one was never filed with the registry, then I don't think so, but I'm open to some suggestion on that. Paul, Keith?
I don't believe we need a motion on the previous one, because that's something that's been never filed, and in its essence, if this ever gets filed, the other one is dated previous to this, and it wouldn't meet. It would basically be null and void because it's an older document, from my understanding, and this would be the latest and greatest.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I would say this current A&R would supersede any prior A&Rs,
Okay, as long as
whether they were filed or not.
as long as the minutes reflect that, in case anybody ever wondered whatever happened to the previous ones. Okay.
Is there any other questions on the parcel and the A&R in its entirety?
All the lot size and the frontage all meet requirements, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
That being the case, do I have a motion?
I'll move to endorse the A&R. Seems pretty straightforward.
A second?
I second.
Motion from Keith and seconded by Cindy to accept the A&R for 106 Clark Street. All in favor? Keith?
Aye.
Paul?
Aye.
Cindy?
Aye.
Myself? Aye. It's past 4:00. Thank you, Cindy, and you can take that down.
Okay. Thank you. A quick question, Paul.
Yes,
the
John.
Mylar, will that end up in the planning board slot at some point that I can pick up?
Well, I'm going to sign those, and I could personally drop it off at your house if you'd like.
Sure. When do you want to do that?
Okay, so you're at 106 Clark then?
Correct.
All right. I'll probably have it there probably Friday, no later than.
Okay, and if it's more convenient, you want me to pop over your place, let me know that too.
All right, we'll do, John. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Our next agenda item is the continuation of a public hearing for a stormwater permit that Greg Felton had filed back in October for 32 High Street. And it's been continued twice previously because of the lack of information that we required. And I believe Bucky Sparkle is here, who is representing, he was here, there he is.
I am.
He is representing Greg for this project. The plans had been emailed to all the members of the board, and also I believe Randall, you received them, and Ron and Ed. Conservation has received them. So at this point in time, we'll ask Mr. Sparkle, I'll have, can you share those from your end?
Looks like I can. So let me start this.
So it's the one that you sent the planning board, not the one for conservation. They're probably one and the same, but in case
They
there's
are
any...
the same. They are indeed the same plan. And hopefully at this point you're seeing a screen that says stormwater permitting.
Yes.
Right. So what I've done is I've taken those plans and incorporated them into a modest little presentation that encapsulates the information that I'm aware of on this project. As you, I'm sure know, Greg Felton has been doing his best to do an awful lot of his development on his own, from running machinery to cutting down trees to letting all sorts of stuff happen that is not been done professionally. And I applaud his self-starter gumption, but I also see how he's ended up in a fair amount of hot water for a variety of things. And he's asked me to try and get him out of that hot water on a few points. So here, let's see how I do. Because I'd really like to get him back into compliance. I think just to give a little background, Greg did his own application mid-October. We got comments back, received an email from the planning board a little bit after that. That was the basis for letter, which I eventually submitted. But before I was able to do that, there was quite a bit of rain on multiple occasions, and I see Randall Kemp is on the screen because we did receive a serious and appropriate letter indicating that there had been multiple sediment discharges. In the latest one being, I think it was the 1st of December, we had 3 inches of rain that day. And that site was insufficiently stabilized, and an immediate response was required. Greg did get the street cleaned up. Hopefully Randall is satisfied with how that went. If not, I'd love to hear from him. If there's anything else that we could do better, I'm very open to hearing that. But part of that letter also said you need to come up with a plan. Of course, a plan needed to go with the permit application originally. So I was able to get out to the site about December 7th and take a look at the work that had been done to clean up the mess, the work that had been started to try and ameliorate stormwater runoff and sediment discharge off-site. And unfortunately, when I got there, I found out that Greg and his contractor had run back into buffer zone that's under the jurisdiction of the Conservation Commission, which again appropriately stirred some feathers. So I feel like most of my job has been damage control, and hopefully this meeting is going to be one of the last efforts I do to try and get everybody satisfied about what's been happening and what will happen. So I was out there, looked at what was going on, codified a plan, which is a result of the plan that was submitted both to the Conservation Commission and to the Planning Board. So the plan has a lot of information on it relative to the stormwater because it's mostly about the conservation and notice of intent, but we'll tease out the important parts. I submitted a letter that addressed all of the points of missing information in the original application, and I provided an O&M document for the features that are going to be installed or are being installed. Now, let me jump in my presentation a little bit. We'll look at the existing conditions briefly just to orient people to the site. So we have in the gray, we have the long driveway that heads up, the future house site, and I will show where that house is on a proposed plan. The existing conditions also at the time showed a 12-inch HDPE culvert here that's still in place, as well as a small pipe that goes right to the edge of the road and a ditch that had been cut into the buffer zone. So this is the 100-foot buffer off the wetland. So anything north of that line needs to be approved by the Concom, and this work had not been approved. So I've been working with them a little bit, and I know Marla Hank is here, at least was earlier. So we're trying to, keep this from being an ongoing problem. We're going to look at a proposed plan here, and most of this is dealing with the NOI. So there's a lot of color, there's a lot of action on this screen. I'm including it here because one of the things that the board requested was showing where the proposed house is going to go in the septic system. So this box, this brown box here, is the proposed house site, and the proposed septic system is right here. And you can see the driveway, you can see the existing 12-inch culvert, and then you can see some proposed work. And then the next slide I'm going to show is going to detail what's happening down here in a little bit better. So let me focus on this part of the world right here. So in order to try and get a grip on what's coming off of this site, several things have happened. One is the previously permitted ditch was repaired because it had sustained damage during the heavy rain in December 1st. This pipe is still in place. The ditch has been extended to a new catch basin. I actually ran out there yesterday briefly, and there's now stone through here. There is a new catch basin here, and there's a 12-inch pipe coming down. Now, I show a nice clear rectangle. This is a proposed retention basin, and Greg and his contractor were getting this installed, but because they were working in the buffer zone and it wasn't permitted yet, they've also stopped. So this work is not entirely done. It's in process, which makes this conversation very awkward because I can't say, oh, you know, we're going to be doing this. I'm sort of in this point of saying, well, they've kind of limped along, and then we had to stop them till we had everybody's permission and approval. What remains to be done out there is connecting this 12-inch pipe, disconnecting the 4-inch pipe that already exists and replacing it with a 12-inch pipe. And then this 12 inches in place, it runs all the way down here. So the sediment basin or retention basin is now sitting in this part of the site. It's deeper than I was asking it to be. I haven't done measurements on it, which is something that I'll want to see in the final result, that has the volume that I'm calling for. But what I'm proposing ultimately is that even though it's a single-family residence and normally not subject to at least the Massachusetts state standards for stormwater discharge, I'm still having the retention basin installed to capture volumetrically. So if you look at all the impervious area for this site, and I'm counting all of the gravel and not just the rooftop, but all of the gravel that's been installed. And you take the first flush volume, which is from water quality standards, a ½ inch of rain. That full volume of water is about 700 cubic feet, and then I added 150% to that volume and said, all right, that's the volume that I want to capture here. So really all of the water that comes from the west-northwest, the uphill part of the site that comes down, is going to be captured in this ditch, except which runs over land, because this is all a slope. The overland flow will end up in the retention basin. The captured flow will end up in the retention basin. The catch basin is designed with a sump, so that will help store some of the grit and keeping it from filling up the basin more quickly. Having a berm installed along here, and then an important point to help protect the resource area is a level spreader is going to be placed at the end of this. And if you're not familiar with level spreaders, it's just basically a level board that is going to make sure water flows out, not at a point source, but is spread out over a 16-foot wide area. So we have a mild, shallow trickle of water that comes out, even if we've got 12-inch pipes with barrels of water coming at us per second. We spread that out over a large area, so it's a much more gentle flow. It's non-erosive velocities, and that's going to end up down in, this is the stream that comes down. There's an existing catch basin here. There's an existing culvert, a 12-inch culvert that is open at the side of the road here as an inlet. And there's some type of drain under the road. I'm guessing it's an edge drain that discharges here as well. But all of the water from this area ends up right here, crosses High Street, and then goes downstream. So I'm hoping that this scenario does a very good job once the site is stabilized with grass of not just collecting the water, but keeping the sediment on site. The other thing that Greg has done that actually wasn't on my plan that he volunteered is he brought in a fair amount of hard pack, but partly because his driveway was damaged. So they brought in a lot of hard pack, that's ground up asphalt to repair the drive. And I actually do have a picture too that he sent me to show that and this parking area. So that material doesn't erode very easily with at least reasonable rainfall volumes. So that's the gist of the plan. And just to kind of wrap this up briefly, I'm going to jump down. I've got details. We can look at those if you like, but this is just sort of a summary of what we're talking about here. So there's silt fence that's out there. More needs to be done when he does other work. So we've improved and extended the existing ditch. There's a new catch basin, 12-inch pipes, retention basin, level spreader, which is likely going to become a wetland resource area eventually. The difference between a retention basin and a detention basin is a detention basin has a defined outlet that slowly lets the water out, and a retention basin holds on to that water kind of indefinitely, and eventually it does soak into the ground, but it's going to become kind of swampy down there over time. So we'll actually be expanding, a wetland into that area. Separately, this is more for the Concom, but on the uphill part of the site, and let me just jump to point where that is. There is a driveway crossing here. The stream comes through here, and Greg had taken out an old little culvert thing and put in another small culvert. Did not meet standards, so this is how I got involved, is we did a stream crossing right here. So the details is it's a big 3-sided box culvert with an 8-foot span. So that's part of what's going on, because I think Greg has had some issues getting all of the water that's coming off the site to go through that little 8-inch pipe when we get 3 inches of rain in one day. So I think that has caused some of the problems here. So that won't be a problem anymore. Oh yes, officially the last thing I do need to request is waivers from a couple points that are normally required for these permits. One is for the topographic survey, bylaw 14.g.1.g. At this point, pretty much all of the site work is complete, so a topographic survey doesn't really add a lot of information or value to the process as far as, in my opinion. And then bylaw 14.g.1.n1 requests proposed profiles and cross sections. And again, this work is basically done at this point. The 2018 Bill Saruta plan had a profile and cross sections for the road, the ditches, the culverts. That information was submitted with my plans, just so it was on the record as part of the submittal and permit. We've also installed, pipes and basins. They're already there to address the sediment discharge. So I'm hoping that the planning board would see fit to waive the requirements for the survey and propose profiles at this point. And I've got more details, and I'm happy to, come here and have a conversation. So let me move up to, I'm not sure, maybe this slide here, and board members, please let me know what you're thinking and how I can help you understand this better.
Before I get the board members, so Ron Lauren doesn't have to hang on longer than necessary, our building inspector. Ron, just a comment from you, if you would. We received a letter from you regarding cease and desist, and just want to get your comment on that.
Can you hear me, Paul? Or?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay. Again, I'm new to this Zoom, so I did issue a stop work order just because I know Conservation had issued two or three different enforcement orders, and I think there was some compliance, and then it went back to non-compliance again. And I know that the Also, the intent of, I believe, the highway superintendent was to allow Greg to continue doing what he had to do just to stabilize everything, but it seemed like he had done that, and then it just seemed like everything just kind of got out of control up there. So at that point, I decided I had to issue a stop work on what was going on up there.
Hey, Ron, I'm sorry to interrupt.
Yeah.
Can you put some dates into context here in terms of when the initial stop order came and then your subsequent involvement?
We sent out the letter certified Wednesday of last week.
Oh,
So
okay.
it's fairly new. And again, that letter, the intent of that was to just stop what was going on. There was an excavator up there at that point. I guess the stuff that was going on wasn't really. It doesn't sound like it was planned that way. It just kind of happened, and the excavator started doing the building the retention pond stuff. So that's why I decided to issue that. Again, there was no plan in place, so I couldn't issue a stop work order on any violations of the stormwater plan since it hasn't even been it hasn't been.
So, Paul, if I might interrupt here,
No,
I guess
go ahead.
my biggest concern is I know that we had a meeting a few weeks back or a month or whenever it was. So we were concerned about immediate, attention to the erosion that was on site that was getting progressively worse because of plans not being or the stop work. And I thought we had discussed having the landowner coordinate with Randall Kemp on immediate mitigation measures to correct or slow down water and potential further destruction due to erosion.
That's correct, Paul. In fact, Randall will chime in on this if you would. I did send that letter to Greg and then copied him on it. And also Randall had got in contact with me because he wanted to be on the same page because we wanted just some immediate remediation there to prevent any further erosion, damage, runoff, etc. So, Randall, would you chime in on that if you could? And this was prior to the cease and desist.
Yeah, so I talked to Bucky on Christmas Eve, and we talked about some of the immediate measures that were going to take place out there. And I believe I told Bucky I'm not opposed to the erosion control work inside or out of the buffer, but stuff inside the buffer is kind of out of my purview, and Concom would have to sign off on that. And I believe that Concom did so, just for erosion control work, though. So
that's my understanding.
So after that, I'm not sure what happened with the.
So what was the excavator doing?
Come again?
What was the excavator doing? Was it doing work beyond the immediate repair?
That's the contention, I guess.
Mm-hmm. So Ron, what were they doing with the excavator that was beyond what was discussed previously?
The retention pond was being built, and I believe that was in violation of the conservation's enforcement order at that point. So the work that was done to clean up the mess and the damage that was done, that was cleaned up a few weeks prior to the excavator showing up and
I thought it was more than just cleaning the mess. I think we wanted
some hay bales and stuff, but I don't think we guys wanted the retention pond built at this point.
What did the letter say that we had?
The letter.
My letter said exactly that, Paul. Any kind of mitigation with hay bales or silt fences, anything to try to prevent the runoff going into High Street. And I'm not quite sure. I didn't go out and inspect the site. I was there after the rain, certainly, which was a mess. But
from his, I'm not going to, without seeing any plans or what they were doing, or I'm not trying to give somebody a pass, but in terms of them putting in a retention pond or something to hold the water in a temporary basis could or could not be a measure, or could make conditions worse. So who directed them to put so that was something that was not discussed with Randall? That was
no,
that
unless it was Conscom business, but it was nothing that I had requested for sure.
If I can speak from the Concom, I did get in contact with Bucky right around that time, just before Christmas, and my communications with him was to allow any work on the left side of facing the driveway, on the left side of the driveway, which was our RDA area, that would be perfectly okay. I went up there on Christmas Day just to see what was going on, and that, in fact, is what they did. Actually, Greg and his girlfriend were up there with a shovel, trying to curtail some of the water that was flowing down. But it looked pretty good to me, and I did communicate that with Randall that the site looked okay. I also followed up with Bucky with a written email stating the same conditions, that it was okay to handle anything left of the driveway.
I'm sorry, who's Bucky? I keep hearing that name.
Oh, I'm Greg's engineer.
Okay, sorry. So the excavator part, somebody was working on that lower retention pond as shown in this drainage improvements plan here?
Yeah, so consequently, and I'm speaking for Marla because she's the one that saw it first, and then I followed up later. When I went up there, they had shaved away some of the hill, sort of made it so that the water would flow down that way. And again, this was in the buffer area, and they had dug out this whatever you're calling it, retention pond or retention area. So that was done totally by Mr. Felton's permission, certainly not from the Concoms.
So Bucky, the retention pond that he was, or that excavation area, was that based on discussions with you, or was that based on an immediate need for that retention base, as you identified there, by the 700 square feet, 2 feet deep, level bottom?
I wish I had an answer that I liked to give you. The truth of the matter is, Greg seems to have difficulty following directions, because both in writing from me and the Conservation Commission, we explicitly said that work should not happen. And when I found out from Marla that it was happening, I gave Greg a call, and I talked to his contractor as well. His contractor was not aware that shouldn't be happening, because he had heard from Greg that everything was fine, go ahead and do the work. And when he found out from me that the permits weren't in place yet, and that the work was, in violation of the Wetlands Protection Act, he threw a fit, got off the phone with me, and apparently called Greg. And these guys are friends. I'm not sure if they're friends anymore at this point. That said, that's a little personal, perhaps, but the contractor was very upset because he had been taking direction from his client. His client had been giving him BS as far as what really ought to be happening there. Greg claims that he misunderstood the directions. I can't say whether or not he did. He does seem to, having that pioneer spirit, just moving forward, wants to get it done. But there's been a very long history now, I'm realizing eventually of him not following the rules and the regulations and the conditions that have been imposed by the Conservation Commission on numerous occasions. And then as we get into the stormwater application and the discharge into the street and violation notices from multiple departments, I have a lot of difficulty understanding how he could keep moving forward in the fashion that he has to this point. I'm not going to defend him and his choices. They were not what he was told. At this point, I'm just trying to make it better from here.
I can say, this is Marla, that what Mr. Sparkle just said is entirely consistent with what I am aware of. I happened to drive down High Street because at any given time we had 4 different projects going on there. So as they conclude, I can ignore them as I drive by, but this one was hard to miss when I saw the excavator, because at the Conservation Commission meeting, we had certainly discussed the retention basin and had continued the meeting until February 1st. So clearly that is not the same as go ahead and do it. But when Art had in writing with Mr. Sparkle saying, yes, you could clean out the ditch on the left side of the driveway just to help the water flow and to not go into the road. Again, Mr. Felton didn't completely read that email that Mr. Sparkle had sent to him, and he just said, it's okay, and then forgot reading the rest of it, told his excavator, go ahead. And when I saw both of them at the site at 2 different times subsequently, the guy, his friend with the excavator, had a fit, also had called me 3 times during the day prior to that, having had a complete and total fit, and that he never works this way. He doesn't want to lose his license. You can ask anybody in any of the nearby towns. He doesn't work that way, blah, blah, blah. So it was quite the hoo-ha. But in the meantime, now we have the project started without having had a permit. So I wrote number 3 enforcement order, cease and desist. Stop, 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 because it's not permitted. We also wanted the planning board to weigh in, because we are not the stormwater experts. We are the prevention of bad things happening to the wetland people. So here we are with all kinds of things dug up, retention basins half in place, waiting for the engineers to weigh in with, is this appropriate before any more can happen? And whereas Mr. Monahan had said, I can fill this all in. And it's like, well, if this is going to be approved, you don't have to keep disturbing the earth. And they had put some, I guess they're called mats. Bucky can, what?
Erosion blankets.
And cover the whole thing. So in the morning, I saw them, the guy with his son out there moving equipment out and putting that hard pack stuff on to tilt the driveway so the water could go into the ditch, so it could go into the right catch basin to go in. So they were doing that. And then when I went by in the afternoon, I saw the erosion blankets being put down, and I got to listen to that side of the story. And it is, again, totally consistent with what Bucky had said. So now we just want to have it stabilized and then have the final design in place before they continue working on it. And we did find that that big mess in the road was because that little way undersized, not permitted culvert up at the top of the hill got blocked. So the water went scooting across the top of the driveway. And that's how we know there's ledge there, and they couldn't put in an additional culvert because they'd have to blast it. And all that water then that should have been in the stream ended up across the street in the yard of the new house. So there we go.
Thank you. Do we have any comments from the board members, Keith, Paul, Cindy, for Mr. Sparkle, and on the plan that was presented in the remediation and what we might expect going forward here.
I would like to, if Mr. Sparkle could talk about the details he provided as a specific engineered layout of what's happening. I know it's some, you kind of skimmed through kind of quickly, but if you can just tell to the board what you have there for information and how that's proposed to mitigate the situation.
Okay, so the details of the overall plan, or like the construction details? I mean,
the construction details, the ones that it was hard for me to see. I wasn't sure.
Yeah, sure.
You had a profile there or something of a.
I will. Let me back up.
Actually, this plan that you were on previously, the previous plan.
The previous plan?
Yeah, the one that you had the plan view. Okay, so what are we looking at? I see a culvert here. Where's that? Where's that going in?
All right. No, unfortunately, I don't get to see where you're pointing. It's not how.
I'm looking at culvert section AA, right in the middle.
Culvert section AA. Okay, so this is the box culvert. This is the section of it. This is a profile view of it. This is a plan view of it. So all of this orange here is replacing the 8-inch plastic pipe that is on the uphill side of the driveway. So it's not in this view. I have to go back one sheet.
I see it. It's upstream. It's upstream.
Yeah, it's upstream. Yeah. So what most of the work that's going on is down here.
Can you zoom in back to that culvert? So that's a hefty upsize from what's up there now.
It is quite a hefty upsize. The Massachusetts stream crossing standards are relatively significant. And they're not there for hydrology. They're there for wildlife passage and maintaining a contiguous ecosystem through the water, the stream bed, the banks, all of these precious things that are disturbed when we build culverts. So the box culvert allows you to have a big open stream that runs underneath. It's 2 orders of magnitude bigger than it needs to be to handle the hydraulic flow, about 100 times bigger. So we shouldn't have any more problems of things getting blocked and water going where it's not supposed to be going once that is installed.
So you have that layout there and sized it appropriately from the standards.
Yes.
And so that's something he's going to cast in place himself.
He will cast that in place. Yeah. Sometimes they're set by they're prefabbed, but Greg is planning on building it on site.
Okay. And then do you have details of the connection and the hydraulic connections to the lower retention pond? You have 2 points. I know that you kind of have a general plan that's showing out what the plan is, but how is someone going to figure out elevations, or what do you have there for elevations and overall detail?
It is true that here's a case where lacking a topographic survey, it does not give me the opportunity to say, oh, like the ditch elevation is 152 and we need a pipe. They come down and the invert has to be at a certain elevation. The way I've designed this is established a relative elevation here. So if we go to the next sheet and I drag myself around a little bit, I want to show you just a section of the so here's the wetland replication. So the level spreader basically, and this is a section of as well as the retention basin itself. So it needs to be at least 18 inches deep, and the plan was to we have so much elevation to play with, and there's no question like, well, can we get water to go there? Yes, water is very, very rapidly going there. So what what I've done is designed it as in, all right, we take an area that's relatively level, we cut down at least 18 inches minimum to the top of the level spreader. So this bar here is the level spreader, and that there's a requirement to be at least 6 inches of freeboard above that, and then building a berm downhill of that. So it's a relative design, and any competent contractor should be able to handle that. I'm sure Brendan Monahan will have no problem. I mean, frankly, half of this work, more than half of this work is already done. And it's a little overbuilt. From what I was able to see, it's deeper than it needs to be. No problem with that. So, you know, Brendan was erring on the side of caution, it seemed, in terms of installing that. There is a berm on the downhill side that also supplements the 6 inches of freeboard. So if we jump back to, you know, this, where are we? It's when I'm zoomed in, it's hard to see. Right, so basically my plan was to take a lot of the spoils from this excavation and then put it on the down gradient side, because there is a slope across here, and I just wanted to create as much buffer in between the basin and a potential overflow, because I want to control it at the level spreader, which runs on the northern side of the basin.
So this is great. Okay, so this is appropriate amount of detail. I have some general questions that, you know, you're asking for a few waivers, and one of the recommendations that I would put to the board, if the board agrees, include, in lieu of the topo, and if this is something the board can discuss, you know, you provided relative elevation needs for the construction of this, as well as the overall sizing of the pipes, the 12-inch plastic pipe, as well as, actually you have two 12-inch pipes there, as well as the low sump or shallow sump catch basin that's at the downstream side. I guess my concern is focused on two things. So your plans have a not for construction note on them, as I noticed to the right. And
all my permit plans have that note, but yes.
So is this not suitable for construction?
I believe it is suitable for construction, absolutely.
Okay, so the point that I'm making is, have these plans, if the board sees so, have these plans updated for that note to be suitable for construction. And I think we need to consider your involvement to, I'm going to use the E word, ensure. No, I guess maybe we'll use that word. I don't know if that's a good enough word, but to document at the end of construction, if the board sees fit, that the construction has been constructed to your satisfaction. And I don't know if it's a letter of certification. Maybe it's a letter of certification from your end saying that it meets the basis of your design. Maybe that's something the board could discuss for consideration in lieu of the requests that or actually to accommodate the requests that are in the waivers.
Seems appropriate.
Keith, do you have anything to say on this?
Yeah. Bucky, thank you for the presentation thus far. It's been helpful. Just a few concerns that I have. I know one of the waiver requests was for profiles, cross sections. I feel that the original driveway profile is rather inadequate. I think it should be updated. It's a hand-drawn sketch. It does provide a profile, but it doesn't provide any cross slope of that driveway. I have a concern with that driveway Right now, the detail is, at least the top surface detail is for trap rock gravel or hard pack. I don't think TRG or hard pack is appropriate considering the slope at that site. So I think the entire driveway plan needs to be revisited, especially considering that on one side of the driveway there is supposed to be a permanent swale that will collect and convey stormwater runoff into the proposed retention basin. I can just see if it is TRG or hard pack that material will eventually end up in the ditch and essentially be a continuous problem. So my opinion, sitting from my chair and from having driven by the site a few times, I think it should be paved. I think there should be some detailed and defined plans for that driveway. The other concern I have is with the box culvert at the top of the project site. Looking at the dimensions of that, that's a 8-foot span by 24-foot long. I'm assuming it's needs to be designed and built for H20 loading.
Yes.
I don't think that should be something that Mr. Felton has the ability to cast in place. That really should be a precast element. I just don't have any confidence that structure would be built or constructed properly on site in a cast in place environment. So I have a real concern about, that's a pretty significant structure that I just don't think is in Mr. Felton's abilities to have built properly. And then I guess lastly, I agree with Paul in regards to there needs to be some kind of ongoing continuous inspection. Maybe it's by you, maybe it's by if the planning board needs peer review of this plan, maybe it's by a third-party engineer that does site inspections like we've done on other projects. So I think that would be appropriate on this project, considering the history to date of it. But those are my kind of initial top 3 concerns.
Cindy?
First of all, for all parties, I'm not an engineer, so I'm only going to speak in terms of practical things here. I appreciate both Paul and Keith giving their engineering opinions here, but I'm concerned about the history of this gentleman, as everybody has said, doesn't seem to either understand or are willing to follow the guidelines he's been given, even in writing. So I'm in great support of having a third-party reviewer checking the site on a periodic basis, and certainly at the cost of this person, Mr. Felton, who owns the land, to check off that it's being followed. That's one thing that I think is pretty important. And the second question I have is, what are the time frames? Here we are, January, winter's at least several weeks to go. What do you expect will happen? And are we in any kind of jeopardy of further erosion or problems? Or has enough been done to stabilize the area? And that's just a question I have right now.
Randall, can you add anything more to this? And I'm going to refer to and ask you to comment. I'm going to refer to the notes that Dan LaValle had sent me about a meeting that yourself, Dan, as a member of the planning board and the CONSCOM, and Building Inspector Ron Lauren had on 12/30 about this site. And some of the highlights of what Dan sent me of your meeting were that there was talk of consideration of maybe a bond on this project to ensure its completion. A peer review was mentioned also, and inspections. There was some other items that we're not going to get involved in about a new perk test before the house is built or anything of that nature. But just kind of highlight that if you, what your concerns are, and either construction-wise too, was there anything in the plan that you would like to see revised?
Nothing jumped out at me as far as needing to be revised. We did talk about the perk test just simply because we know this is a pretty complex plan, and should the applicant need, the septic or the recharge area or whatever, or not recharge area, the secondary septic area, we didn't want the applicant to have to come back. So just thinking of all this stuff up front was our purpose for discussing that. As far as the bond, we discussed that. I think that might be appropriate given the history of the site. There are some complex things here. Actually, Keith brought up something I hadn't even thought of, the size of that box culvert. So yeah, a bond, I think a bond would be appropriate to ensure that milestones are hit here and everything is constructed properly, and that the project isn't just abandoned. And because I think then the town would have to pay or invest money into stabilizing it. Second point was peer review, whether it's Bucky or one of the planning boards, someone of the planning board's choosing. I don't have a strong feeling either way there. And I don't see much on the plan that jumps out at me as needing modification. The only thing the basin was based on 1/2 inch of rainfall, which seemed a little low to me, but I'm not an expert on that. So I don't know if maybe Bucky could address that. I know sometimes we go for, handling a 25-year storm or a 10-year storm or whatever, and 1/2 inch of rain seems like maybe a 2-year storm.
Yeah, not even that is the reality, Randall. I'd be happy to talk more, but I want to hear from the board.
No, go ahead on that, Bucky.
Okay. In terms of the 1/2 inch, we'll start there, of rainfall, that's colloquially in engineering terms, it's called the first flush. And it's also a water quality volume, and it's selected often not necessarily for the volume of water, but because of what that first amount of rainfall washes off of a site in general. It tends to be the most polluted amount. So I wanted to make sure that 100% of that was captured. In terms of sizing a stormwater management system for a single family residence, I'm perhaps Southampton has standards for this, but normally there are no standards nor any requirements to do anything like that. Here we are with a permit application for stormwater to make sure that we're not going to cause problems, but I don't believe anywhere in those applications where, it's really geared at a commercial or a large residential development. Does the town have specific engineering standards for one single family house?
Not yet.
I honestly, personally, I think every bit of impervious area that gets built ought to have at least some amount of compensation for it. And we are in a situation right now where things haven't gone very smoothly, and that's a bit of an understatement. And I can understand wanting greater and stronger controls. The reality is, could we build a bigger basin? Sure, we could. I don't think that would be particularly difficult or onerous for this project. I would like the town to provide standards against which I could design, because that's, there isn't a precedent for that. And quite frequently when I do drainage for single family houses, because of special permitting requirements, often ZBAs, and unless you're in a critical area like a water supply district, the 1/2 inch of rainfall against 100% of the impervious area has really been a really nice middle ground. We're providing a fair amount of protection. There's more than 1,000 cubic feet of water that is going to be captured and will soak into the ground the first 1,000 feet for every rainstorm. And that's meaningful. And, the house across the street, and every other house in town, very few of them are going to have any type of stormwater management system. I know Greg's had some issues, but we are providing something fairly substantial as is. So bigger than that, and we're talking, like commercial parking lot. So I want to make sure that it's not too onerous for Greg in this particular case.
I think that's fair. I just, we've tripped the amount of space cleared to require a stormwater permit. So, I mean, there has been a substantial amount of the lot cleared and under development.
Absolutely. And separate from this particular application, I fully encourage the town of Southampton to, require some amount of modest amelioration for stormwater management for all new impervious area. I mean, it's just a kindness to the environment. Some homes are bigger than others. Some driveways are bigger than others.
If you have an extra hour after this hearing, we'll address just that.
No, really. I got my dinner waiting for me. I bet I'm not around, but thanks for the invite.
If I may just
go ahead,
chime in a couple things. I mean, I think, Keith brought up a good point about the driveway. I think we need to reconsider the material that goes there, given the potential for it being a maintenance diva, given the sediment potential there. I think that's a good point. The need for a peer review, I don't know. I think that's potentially overkill for site development. I think the engineer certification goes a long way. I mean, I think engineering judgment goes into what Bucky's done here, and the level of preparation I think should be considered, given he's putting his professional liability on it. So I think that, coupled with his oversight during construction, might be suitable. If the board would consider that, given that we're just tacking on with the bond and then the peer review. I mean, that's just making the cost go quite a bit up. I mean, it's up to the board what the board feels comfortable with.
No, you're absolutely right, Paul. That's stuff that we typically on a residential we haven't required, but this situation certainly is out of the ordinary, and the horse has been out of the barn a long time on this. So yeah, I'm not. I can go either way on the bond, but again, if Mr. Sparkle puts his certification on it and inspects it along the way, we could trust that. I'm not quite sure we need an independent firm to come in on this unless some of the other board members feel strongly about it. Keith?
No, I think I would share Paul Forgal's sentiment with Mr. Sparkle's certification and presumed oversight during construction. I would be comfortable with that.
Okay, so now going forward, so we can move along, we're going to continue this again. Am I right, Paul Forgal, that we want some, and Keith, we want driveway profile plan, precast box culvert. You want elevation of the retention pond and pipe sizings?
Well, he's got all the pipe sizings identified. I think the elevations are a no-brainer out there. I mean, with the fact that it's quite steep, so he's going to gain what he wants. I think it's just a matter of the satisfaction of Bucky with the construction that's out there.
Okay, so you still want him to come back with a driveway profile and material, right?
Well, I don't know if we need a driveway profile. It's more about the driveway material that Keith brought up to reevaluate its appropriateness.
Keith?
Yeah, I think it's the topping, whatever top surface course is planned. like I said, I don't believe TRG is an appropriate material considering there's about a 14% down gradient down that driveway. And I also think it'd be appropriate to revise or enhance the cross section of that driveway and at least provide a cross slope so that the contractor is aware that it does need to be graded such that all runoff enters that swale. So I just don't want to take any chances, not at this stage where we have the opportunity to try to get it right.
Now, do you want
There's a
him
note for that.
Is that something you want him to return with on that, or are we just going to condition it?
I think that's something we should see that detail.
Okay.
Well, there is a note about that, Keith.
Where'd you see that, Paul?
It's the second note above, or above install 2.5 inch. It says drive grade to pitch towards ditch. It's
You're looking at the hand sketch?
I'm looking at the hold on a second.
That's on the detail here. So I do have a few flow arrows. Hey, look at that. That's fancy.
There's an annotate function.
Hey. Oh.
I use it 30 times a day.
Gosh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I was looking at the hand sketch prepared by the prior engineer, where I wasn't seeing any notation about cross slope.
Yeah, I fully agree that there should be a strong cross slope pointing toward the ditch. I have mixed feelings about paving this for a couple of reasons. One, if we do have a strong cross slope toward the ditch, the only water won't be traveling longitudinally down the driveway at a 14% grade for very far before it ends up right in that ditch. So if we have, say, a 5% tilt on that pavement, well, not pavement, the drive surface into the ditch, the water will shed off pretty quickly and of its own regard. And I think they were talking about TRG, trap rock gravel, that's a terrible driveway surface. The hard pack that's there does a decent job. It does have some finer particles in it. Over time, the material tends to bind up a little better. And I'm comfortable with that surface. If you put on pavement, I know that not that it's necessarily an impediment, but we would definitely have to go back to the Conservation Commission because they had concerns, if I recall, and maybe Art can back me up because I wasn't here for this part of the process. It was before my time, but they're adding all that asphalt adds quite a bit of impervious area, and you're going to get more water coming off of this site and less groundwater recharge. So there are definitely downsides to paving the site. I understand the concerns, though. If you do have longitudinal erosion, if water can't get into that ditch for some reason, say over the years it starts to rut, it's easy to regrade, fortunately, but maybe the town can maintain some sort of special condition where you have an enforceable means of saying he has to maintain that cross slope adequately. It's a lot of pavement that would be added to the world. I'm not sure it's a very good reason with that cross slope because it's just the water that falls from the sky that's going to be on it. There's nothing shedding off of the slope that will cross the driveway anymore.
So Bucky, I got a couple questions. I do think that is a concern to have is the if he does put hot mix down. I mean, obviously that's increasing the speed of the velocity of the water as well as the impervious, so that's a concern. So given that this is a potential maintenance diva, this catch basin here, you have a two foot sump. Mm-hmm. Do we consider making it a 4 foot? I mean, do you consider in that case to provide a little bit of cushion for maintenance purposes, make it 4? And then secondly, let's talk about this connection here, the 12 inch that is, do we have a detail of what that's supposed to look like?
No, we don't. In fact, when I went out there, it's built. It was built before I ever showed up on this project. The way it it acts, and I'll zoom in just a little bit more. Although I'll tell you, Paul, is that annotation function, is that a zoom thing that I'm just not?
Yeah. So pull up your.
Oh my gosh.
You got it. View options.
I've never attempted this, so thank you.
You're welcome.
All right. Hey, I've learned something today. That's great. So this dash, now that I've zoomed in, maybe I'm in a little bit close, but this dashed orange line is the ditch. This is the existing HDPE pipe that runs under there. So right now they have stone. We've got like 3-inch stone that is now lining this channel. The site's still a little messy, but it does hold water to this point. And then there's a little rise. So almost all of the water is going to go to this culvert. It won't make it to the catch basin that's lower. So that the catch basin is a backup plan in some ways. There is, if for some reason this culvert is blocked and or overrun, he has added another 12-inch pipe, and I do want to back up a little bit. All right, there we go. So there is another 12-inch pipe that now runs through here and actually enters the side of the catch basin. So if this fails to handle all of the water, this now is in place. And this is a buried pipe that comes along underneath the ditch, which then has stone over the top of it, but it's more like 1.5-inch stone, a little smaller. And that enters, this catch basin's already existing. He already built it. And then they have a 12-inch pipe that comes out down this direction. So all of this is really a backup system and would only handle water that comes from the sky for here and a bit that comes from the hill above. But that doesn't necessarily all drain here. Some of it naturally flows this direction to the bottom of the screen. I guess it's relatively south. So that's how it looks right now. So if you were to look at this ditch and cross section, if you were to stand up here and look down, you would see, here, let me do some drawing right on my own screen. You'd have the road coming over, the ditch would come down, the big hillside comes up, and the culvert end is here. This is really hard to make look good. Okay. And that end pipe is on one end, and then there's a rise, and then there's another culvert that's higher. And my proportions aren't very good here because this culvert is now higher than the road, and that's not how it is. But if this, which is this pipe, fails to do the job, then there's another culvert that Greg installed that leads directly to the catch basin, plus the ditch that's still above that culvert that leads directly to the catch basin. So it's a lot of belt and suspenders going on there. I didn't call for it, but I don't see a problem with it.
What size is that?
12-inch also. Everything's 12-inch on his site.
So he's got that. So going back to that catch basin, so he's got basically an inlet, right? Because he's got a top on it that accepts water as well, right? So, okay, so if there's any overhead flow, that's going to be flowing into that grate.
Yes, and there will be some. So there is water that comes off of the drive, ends up in this ditch and comes in, but it's not the acreage that is uphill.
Right. So that intersection of the two 12-inches that are at the higher end, do we have, so you said that was constructed and you feel that's to your satisfaction in terms of its, what does he have, like trap rock or some riprap around there to slow the water down so it doesn't overflow? Yeah,
it's mostly 3-inch stone. On this section, the uphill, the workhorse section of the ditch has 3-inch stone in it, leading down to that pipe inlet. And then where the we'll send almost all the water to that direction. But then we do have a little more surface water, so we've got slightly smaller stone lining the ditch through here above the buried pipe.
So the one thing that so the forebay, does that need to be, so that seems like that's an existing feature that's there. Is that an adequate size that he has out there? Or is that
No, I'm calling out for that forebay to be filled. It's worthless. It's absolutely worthless. So,
okay, fill it. Okay, I see.
We'll just have, once we have the retention basin in here, that's going to have an enormous volume capacity. And part of the operation and maintenance plan is that, as this gets filled up, once you get 6 inches in the bottom, because the full volume is 18 inch, or the volume that I want collected is a foot, but I made the basin 1.5 foot deep, anticipating sediment coming in. So after 6 inches of sediment fills in the basin, they have to scrape that out. So we have a place for sediment to settle out, particularly since this is retention and not detention.
And I'm sure he's going to want some clean out there too, right, for that bend?
I think at this point it's probably not critical because of the size of the pipe and that there's an open end right here. You can very easily clean out a pipe with this access point, and putting a small, it's not very deep, but putting a clean out, I mean, you'd have to have another, a whole manhole structure to do that. I don't think you could.
Don't they make tees? Doesn't ADS make tees?
Yeah, I mean, you can have a tee that comes up to the surface. I'm not. If
I don't care. It's your call. It's just if I'm the landowner, I probably want to make it ease of access. But I see your point being short before it bends.
Yeah, I've got almost this exact same pipe system, an 8-inch version in my house and driveway, and I had when I was building my house, I had a whole bunch of erosion. It filled my pipe, a lot of headache. The fact that I had an 8-inch hole near a bend that was not nearly this stiff was really great. It was more than I needed. And I'm also, this pipe is not yet installed. So one thing that I'd be willing to do here, if I can do this, is maybe we can straighten this out and he can make a straight shot into the basin and not do, I don't know how to work this yet. And not do this alignment, but bring that pipe down here. This alignment was chosen because he said, well, I'm going to remove this 4-inch pipe. Well, now we already have a ditch dug for that, a trench for the pipe, so I'll just use that. But we can abandon that pipe in place and make a slightly shorter run, bring it out of the buffer zone for what that's worth, which is something, and have a straight shot. I'm good with that.
Whatever feels appropriate. I was just, making a homeowner's point. If I'm the homeowner and if I don't, I would be personally concerned. I'm not concerned. It would be a pet peeve. That's probably the word I'm looking for.
Mm-hmm. Sure. Yeah, that might require clean out on occasion, and if we straighten out that pipe, we can avoid that. So, straighten pipe, no problem.
Okay, so if we move along here, Randall, any other concerns from you?
None that jump out, Paul.
Okay, Keith?
I guess just regarding the driveway surfacing, I would follow Bucky's recommendation, if provided an appropriate material was actually installed that met, whatever gradation the engineer deemed appropriate.
I would be happy to provide a cross-section sample for the drive, not a profile, but a cross-section. So it was written into the permit and the plans that the drive has to be pitched strongly toward the ditch. So it's unambiguous 5 years from now or 2 owners from now.
Could you also provide a material specification or gradation, sieve analysis, whether it's a Mass DOT material?
Yes.
Yep.
So do we need,
I have a question, Paul.
go ahead.
Do we resolve the question of whether we need a bond on this project?
I heard the sentiments that they didn't feel it was necessary because of the engineer's certification.
I thought that had to do with the peer review.
Well, on the entire inspections and plans.
Okay, I'm just thinking what Randall said about if this fellow abandoned his property, it would be at the cost of the town to fix everything. Does everybody agree? No bond is needed?
How are you on a bond?
I don't think it's necessary. I mean, it's private property. He's already got a lot of money invested in this site. And I think, this is not something that, we would be putting a bond. I mean, typically we've done bonds, I know, in the past for roads that we would be taking over that we assume ownership. But given this is private property, I feel like it's not something we typically would do. And I mean, I do share your concern, but given that he's eager to get something done here, I consider that as a positive, even though it wasn't in light of what the town was looking for. But in terms of him trying to, having an engineer on board that has developed these plans and an ability to get this done, he was already got, somewhat mobilized. I mean, I think, I don't think it's necessary.
Keith, your sentiment on that?
I would agree.
Okay.
So once again, do we need, do we close this, or do we need to have them come back, or do I write the conditions as I've got them listed? Was there one item, Paul or Keith, that you wanted them to come back on with some sort of specs?
Well, I think it was the driveway surfacing, a detail and a material spec for the driveway surfacing. I guess I can say I would trust that Bucky would provide that in the final for construction RFC plan set. So as long as we make it a condition here tonight, I would be comfortable with moving this forward into a construction phase, hopefully.
Maybe have Randall approve that detail so at least the town has had its eyeballs on it as part of the condition.
Yep.
Okay, that being the case, let me just go over, let me get a motion first to close the public hearing.
This is Janet. May I just ask one question, Mr. Spark, before you come? I believe you mentioned at one point that this orange thing here, the water would be going over High Street. And I just wonder, where is it going to go over High Street, and where will it go after it goes over High Street? Because we are down below this. Water only goes downhill.
It doesn't cross High Street, fortunately. Part of this is very important to keep the water out of the road. So all those annotations, just stay right there. This is hilarious. So there is a catch basin here, which it's a catch basin and it's a headwall inlet for the stream, the intermittent stream that's on site. So the water from this entire site and the system would flow to the north. And
isn't that uphill?
It is not. No, the stream is much lower than this part of the site. And the road is much lower too. So I want the 4-inch pipe that currently discharges to the road right away. I want that eliminated. And then I would like to see the water sheet flow gently toward the stream and then toward the culvert catch basin that is under High Street. So the water would flow under High Street. It wouldn't get into the pavement at all. And I really want to keep it out of the right of way too. I don't even want to run it along the side of the road. There's no ditch there.
Under High Street into what? Is there a culvert?
This stream. This stream continues.
Uh-huh.
And I don't have mapping for it going past. And if we jump briefly, These annotations are stuck here. I'm going to have to learn how to use that better, right? But this stream that runs down through, that's shown in blue, goes through a large culvert and then continues. And I'm not exactly sure what direction it goes from there. It goes to the northeast and east.
Yeah, well, I know the damage that was caused on Mr. Kent's property, and we abut him, so.
Is Mr. Kent the house across the street?
The gray house, yep.
Yeah, that was pretty upsetting.
Yes. Especially to him.
No doubt.
Yeah.
I have a lot of sympathy for his situation, and maybe he'll be able to work something out with Greg at some point.
Well, I know we just have an open field, but still, the water still goes downhill. And if he's damaged like that, we could be too. And I just wanted to have that clarified.
Sure. I'm not sure, Janet. Where are you on this map?
I'm right next to Mr. Kent and across the street from Mr. Rubner.
So you're a little off the bottom of the page, down this way.
No, I think I'm up closer to Route 10.
Oh, so you're up this way.
Yes. Uh-huh.
Yeah.
The open field is.
See if I can get you a better answer here. With just some quick mapping.
Hey, Bucky, there is a function for clearing your drawing in the toolbar.
Is it the undo?
It's the clear.
Clear all my drawings. Oh,
I was trying to clear yours, but I couldn't do it.
Well, thanks, Paul. I do appreciate that.
Learn something new every day.
To High Street. So just to try and answer this question as quickly as I can about the stream.
I'm sorry to interrupt.
No, this is an important question. So what I'm going to do is shift to a different screen, which is going to be a strange proportion, perhaps. Maybe I can make this make more sense for you. So are you able to see the Google map that I brought up at this point?
Yes, I can. Uh-huh.
Okay. So you can see the construction site presently, and the retention basin is going to be over here. Now, if we go to the non-satellite view, this is Potash Brook. This is where the water ends up eventually. It ends up here.
Where's do you have an arrow pointing to Potash Brook? I think I see it right now because I can see our property in High Street because Potash Brook goes through our property.
Yeah, I'm drawing. It's not letting me draw. What the heck? But Potash is the blue line on the screen. And then if you go back to the satellite view, that blue line falls through this section. And I think there are several branches. I think there's water coming from here. I think there's water coming from here. I think there's water coming from here.
I can't see a blue line. I see a red thing on the left.
That's the site.
Yeah, that's the site. So if you're able to see my cursor,
No, I can't.
on Earth?
Yeah.
You got to annotate again.
I can see what is.
Well, I am on annotate, and but Google Maps is a little funny sometimes with software. So I find that every time I click on it, all I'm doing is dragging around.
So go to hit draw again. See the draw. You got to go back to the draw.
I do see that, and there's a squiggle line and arrows and rectangles and circles, and I click it, and then it does nothing. Oh, you're over on that screen. I am so confused.
Yeah, you're showing us the aerial.
Yeah, well, that's where I'm trying to write, and if I'm trying to draw, it doesn't let me draw on any screen I have open.
We're right across the street from the red house, and that's High Street. I can tell that in our property.
Yeah. Well, I guess the gist of it is the water from the stream that runs on the north side of the property ends up in this large basin-y area.
Mm-hmm.
It's lower. There's a new house directly across, and then it drops off. So there's a line of trees. That line of trees continues and it receives the water from from this intermittent brook. It doesn't have a name, but it crosses at High Street. Our water is going into the brook will keep going where it's going. It might be a simple way to state this.
Okay. It's becoming less intermittent. Okay.
All streams are, as the climate changes.
They're becoming more permanent than intermittent. Okay, I just wonder what's happening to the water that's going downhill.
Absolutely.
Okay, any other comments?
Thank you. No.
Right, can I have a motion then to close the public hearing?
I'd like to make a motion to close the public hearing.
I'll second.
Motion to close the public hearing has been made and seconded. Take a roll call. Keith?
Aye.
Paul?
Aye.
Cindy?
Aye.
Oh, yes. And now, I'll just go over the conditions here and correct me if you may along the way that I've got it correct. Keith, you requested that the box culvert be precast, correct?
I think it's appropriate. I don't think that should be fabricate on site element.
Okay.
I guess my only question is, precast, you probably need for that size, does it need a crane to get that in there? Is that doable?
You'll need a large machine for sure. I'm not sure if, a small crane or a large excavator, one of those would be necessary in this regard.
Yeah, the culvert would be several pieces. It's 8 foot inside, clear span by 24 foot long. So most likely it would be 4 foot segments. So
about right.
Moderately sized excavator will easily handle it. But I just don't see the ability to cast this in place and withstand H20 loading requirements.
Well, I didn't see any rebar design layout or anything of that nature with respect to.
It called for rebar, at least in the footings, but to my point exactly, there's no. I think the note actually maybe listed it as a contractor design build, but I think a precast element would be more appropriate. Take the guesswork out of it and the QC out of it.
I normally do specify precast. In this case, the contractor, I understand, has quite a lot of experience in building precast culverts, and I left it up to them to do the appropriate design and get the structural support. I'm not a structural engineer, so we're talking about basically a bridge deck design here.
Yep.
So I always call out precast, but I have seen contractors do this successfully on their own in the field. Once using a bank vault, portions of a bank vault, it was quite interesting. But so that I guess that's going to be the board's call.
Well, given the applicant's negligence going back quite a ways, I have no issue, and I'm not anything to do with engineering, but I will side with Keith on this, because there's no guarantee that it's going to be built the way Mr. Felton has cut corners before.
I agree.
Next, I've got he's going to provide the cross section of the driveway and the material specs. Is that correct?
Correct.
I think Paul mentioned this, but it might not be pertinent now. Someone had mentioned the elevation of the retention pond. No.
I think it goes into the bigger discussion with a certification by the applicant's engineer that it's in conformance with his engineered plans.
Okay. Pipe sizings as well?
Yeah, that all falls in that greater classification.
Documentation at the completion with his certification, and also ongoing inspections at all phases of construction. I had a note here, maintain cross slope.
That's the driveway detail.
All right, that driveway, all right.
But I think you mentioned that previously, right?
And then Mr. Sparkle said they were going to eliminate the pipe that is now running into High Street, correct?
Yes, the 4-inch pipe that's being eliminated.
Any other conditions, Randall, that you can think of that you would like to add?
I had seen somewhere an operations and maintenance plan. I'd like to see that recorded somewhere, whether it's in your order of conditions or in the Concom's filing. It doesn't matter to me. I'd just like it to be commemorated somewhere.
That can happen any place. So since it was submitted with, it would have more teeth if it went with the Concom, in my opinion, because that is recorded at the Registry of Deed, the order of conditions, and the O&M inspection log and process can be appended to that.
That's fair.
And that was it, unless I missed something. Everybody good with that? If so, then I'll ask a motion to approve with conditions the stormwater application for Greg Felton at 32 High Street.
A motion to approve with said conditions.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Any other further discussion? We'll have a roll call. Keith?
Aye.
Paul?
Aye.
Cindy?
Aye.
Paul, yes. Right. Thank you very much, Mr. Sparkle. It was very enlightening. You really covered a lot there, and I appreciate your candor and your honesty with the program, and I kind of empathize with you working with the applicant because he had to do this the hard way. It didn't have to be done this way, but he chose that route, so that's what we've got. But I appreciate you hopefully can keep him on the straight and narrow going forward, so there's no more.
That's a lot of pressure. Yeah, thank you. I'm going to do my best here to keep them in line. The ongoing inspections will certainly help with that.
Thanks so much.
You're welcome. It's nice to meet the Southampton Planning Board tonight. So maybe I'll get to see you again soon.
Thank you.
Thank you. Take care.
Now on to some more stormwater. Isn't that just so exciting?
I think we lost Larry.
He was no, he's there. He's
I see a little bit of drool coming.
Comatose, but he's still there.
I see some drool. Great resolution you got that on that Moto phone of yours.
Okay, the public hearing I'm now going to open up is for the MS4 stormwater bylaw regulations and material that went with it. The public hearing was advertised in the Daily Hampshire Gazette on December 22nd and the 29th. And whatever comes about with this tonight, should it go forward, it will be then presented to the town meeting at some juncture for approval. So Larry Smith is here to chime in. Now, Cindy, correct me if I'm wrong, because you were in on this from the get-go along with Randall and Ed. And Ed, maybe I can tap you first, that this is, according to PVPC, this is replacing the existing stormwater bylaw, and we are incorporating this now in the regulations into general bylaw, correct?
Right. Actually, a two-part puzzle, if you would like to refer it to that. It would be removing the current portion of the stormwater zoning bylaw from there, and then putting this in place in the general bylaws, and then also having the rules and regulations. So when I went to town meeting, there'd be a one article to remove the current stormwater zoning bylaw article, and then another article to actually put this or an edited version of this into the general bylaws.
Okay. Dan, I mean, Art was in on this and Randall on the committee. Is there any comments you want to make going forward? We reviewed it and pretty much keyed on the planning board responsibilities. There was an awful lot of technical information that was well over all of our heads except for our two engineers. So comments from Randall and then Art.
Well, a lot of it was pretty hard for us to digest too. We did it over how many meetings? 6, 7, 8 meetings.
Probably 8.
Yeah, and I think there were a number of things we had just needed a little guidance on from planning. In addition, I think we wanted to make sure that stuff jived with your regulations. And that was our goal there. It looks like, so you guys have already gone over a lot of this. And
yeah, we edited it, and if there's any particular portion you're looking at, we tweaked some of it, but Cindy's got the document if you want to refer to anything, it can be posted.
Do you want me to call anything up, Randall, right now?
I am looking for it, and I've only got a pile this thick of materials from our meetings, and I'm looking for the most recent version that you guys have.
Well,
I'm not coming up with it.
Well, the most recent, I took out all Patty's comments, etc.
Okay.
And there were a few things that the planning board looked at to clarify because those questions had come up, and we did our best to fix those. So if you want, I can call up either the bylaw, the clean copy without Patty's comments, or the regs, or, you know, which, if you want me to see it on the screen, we can do that.
Was there anything major that you guys changed, or was it all like clarification of?
It was clarification of procedure, et cetera, but did you have a chance to see them? I mean, I know Paul posted with the posting of the meeting. I think you posted the clean copy of the regulations, Paul. I didn't see the bylaw that you posted.
I could have sworn I printed it out, but I'm not seeing it. I understand Mr. Larry Smith was involved in going over it. He's a PVPC guy.
Not anymore, huh?
It was.
So Larry, you had comments last time.
Yes, I do.
And I think there were more or less procedural kinds of comments. I didn't know if you had a chance to make any specific modifications or even talk to Patty, who was part of this.
Well, no, actually, and unfortunately, I do not have a copy in front of me. My computer crashed over the weekend, and it's we're getting a new one tomorrow. So I don't actually have the text in front of me. But I will go over what we had talked about last time. And I was not going to talk to Patty about it, but that's okay. And it has to do with the fact that historically, stormwater management has always been part of the review of almost every type of development permit that this town would issue, whether that be a subdivision approval, whether that be a special permit approval for like a shopping mall or a commercial strip or a multifamily development or an apartment complex or something like that. But the stormwater management component has always been part of that site plan and part of that review, and part of that review process, and part of the issuance of that particular permit. And there was a reason for that, which is because stormwater management is an integral part and is impacted by a lot of other things that are going on with the particular type of development, whether that be parking, whether it be sidewalks, whether it be other utilities, et cetera. And so it just doesn't make sense to me, and it hasn't in really any town I've worked in, to suddenly take just the stormwater element of that particular development project and separate it from the normal permitting process to a separate permit for just the stormwater management. And the way we've always done it in the past is that, and there's really nothing wrong with the new DEP stormwater regulations. I mean, they just get better and better, and more complicated, and more and more efficient and more effective. But you can achieve the same thing if you adopt a stormwater management bylaw and you do it as a town bylaw, and you include in that, all the regulations and all the design requirements and all the performance standards that you want. And then in your zoning bylaw or your subdivision regulations, when you get to the stormwater section of that, you just refer to the town bylaw and say, just make sure your stormwater design complies with that bylaw. But it doesn't require a separate permit. It still would be part of the subdivision approval that was issued, or the special permit for the apartment complex or the shopping strip mall, or whatever other kind of project you were doing. It just doesn't seem to make sense to take that one key element of the overall project, and treat it as a separate and distinct standalone permit for that, where it is an integral part of the overall project. And that would be the case, I think, also relative to permits that are issued by the Zoning Board of Appeals, special permits that they issue, as well as probably the Conservation Commission. As I know from my experience with Conservation Commissions and wetland permits and applications, stormwater management is an integral part of the overall project and what they are reviewing. So to take it out and treat it separately to me just doesn't make any sense. Where you could achieve the same of what you're trying to achieve by just requiring that they include in their design the overall, design requirements and performance standards that the bylaw would require. The only time I think I see where a separate stormwater management permit would be required would be if the project doesn't already require some other type of development permit, where stormwater would not be taken a look at. In that particular type of project, I think that, in fact, yes, that kind of project would require a separate stormwater management permit because it would not be receiving any other type of permit.
Where does that leave us with the way it's been designed right now?
I don't believe that's the way I see it. The way I read it, the way you have it designed now, is there's a stormwater management permit, and stormwater management for any kind of project or development project would be taken as a separate permit and issued only for the stormwater management, and it would be issued by the planning board, even if it was a Conservation Commission permit, even if it was a Zoning Board of Appeals permit. And while the Zoning Board of Appeals might be issuing their special permit on everything else relative to that project, for some reason, stormwater management would be issued specifically by the planning board.
Yeah, Paul, I got some hard problems with this. Primarily, we had two members of the PVPC on this project with us, and this was the approach they were taking. And why were they taking this approach if all of a sudden now it doesn't jive? I'm having real problems with this.
Did they explain it to you that there might be other alternatives to it? Have they Have they had extensive experience as municipal planners?
Well, one of them it was Ken Comia.
Ken has had 2 years' experience as a municipal planner with the town of Southbridge.
Yeah, so? So, what are you saying?
What I'm saying is, most municipal planners would rather not have a separate permit for stormwater management. Whoops. Well, that lasts a little while. How long is it, Rick? Okay. Let me get that. Crap. There we go. And in fact, I think you'll find in other towns that they've in fact set it up like that. If you, and if you can, if you think it makes more sense to take that one particular design item out of an overall project and permit it separately from all the rest, go ahead.
Well, that's certainly not going to streamline the process by doing it that way.
No. I don't think so. And that's why I've never done it.
Why wouldn't it?
So correct me if I'm wrong, that's the way we do it now.
Why wouldn't it?
Well, then you're having more than one meeting, I guess. You're having a separate meeting for the permit and then another one for the whatever else the other plan may be.
Tie them together. Same meeting, same hearings.
The way that could be accomplished, Larry, is with that zoning application that you drew up years ago, correct?
Well, the problem you have is where the planning board is issuing the special the stormwater management permit, and the zoning board of appeals is issuing the special permit. I guess you could both attend the same meeting, but you would still end up with two boards issuing two permits for the same project.
Correct me if I'm wrong.
And I would probably think the town would be better off with one board issuing that stormwater rather than having different boards dealing with it.
Well, I guess I wonder, how will the Conservation Commission be able to issue their wetlands permit if in fact they're not the ones that are in control or in charge of reviewing the stormwater management permit?
Isn't that the way we do it now?
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
Oh, I have no idea. The way you have it now is you have it as part of your zoning bylaw, which is not where it should be. It should be part of the general bylaw. And in fact, we talked with the planning board for a number of years about correcting that.
So this bylaw is coming out of there. According to this, we're removing it.
Well, I think part of
Right,
it. Sorry.
Ed, correct?
Right. And
And
then it's going to then it would be in the general bylaw.
Well, my understanding, what I received a copy was, is there were two sections for it, and one was going to go zoning, and one portion was going to go town bylaw.
No,
And Cindy, maybe you can correct me on that.
I don't exactly know how you concluded that. It's exactly what Ed said in the beginning. This is going to go into general bylaws.
Okay, but you said two sections, right?
I sent you four things. I
Right.
sent you the notes that included all the comments from our consultant, Patty.
Yeah.
And then I sent you a clean copy of each. Yep. One was the regulations and one was the bylaw.
Correct.
So you had two of each.
Correct. And so, the bylaw was a general town bylaw.
The new, it will go into general bylaw if approved at town meeting, yes.
Right. And then what were the regulations? Where do those go?
was it going into general too, correct?
They should.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, right, Ed? Isn't that the intention, that the
It should be
regulations will
all,
go into general?
yeah, it should be all in the same bylaw. the same general bylaw.
And if you can correct me on that, is that the expectation that the regulations will go into the general bylaws?
That's a problem, though. I mean, you can't change anything then, you know?
Right.
You have to have a town meeting and everything else. That's why you do regulations.
Right. My understanding is the rules and regulations would be adopted under the rules and regulations of the planning board.
Right.
Does that answer your question, Larry?
It wasn't really a question, but yes, that explains that.
So does that meet your extensive experience with this? Does that meet if this new bylaw is accepted by the town and goes into general bylaws, you called it town bylaws, that is exactly what you're recommending. And then if somebody goes before the ZBA, then they have the town bylaw to utilize. It's not in zoning bylaw.
Well, actually, it's not. Again, what I'm recommending is that whoever is issuing the underlying development permit should also be including in that the stormwater management. It shouldn't be taken out and treated separately as a second permit.
So it's almost, to me then, correct me if I'm wrong, that the planning board has to approve the stormwater management plan before the special permit or whatever else can be approved. Is it contingent upon that, right?
Well, that's not really specified or made clear in the bylaw. It's just from my experience, it doesn't make sense having one board be responsible for really the major permit for the underlying project, and then have another board in charge of one component of that.
And to me, it doesn't make any sense to have multiple boards look at something and be inconsistent with it.
Well, that's a good point. And I think one of the reasons for that is because, and I think one of the reasons I think the planning board is so successful is the planning board utilizes peer reviews and the hiring of outside engineering consultants to review their projects.
And so does conservation. We do the same thing.
Excellent. That's excellent. And I'm not sure about the zoning board. My suggestion has always been, and I think I've also had this conversation with the planning board, that rather having each board adopt their own peer reviewer for each particular project as it comes in, what the town can do is put out an RFP and contract to hire a single engineering firm to handle all peer reviews for all town applications. And I think that I like, because that does provide a lot of consistency in terms of the continuity, in terms of how the plans are reviewed and how including the stormwater drainage. And not only from project to project, between projects for like just the planning board, but also it provides continuity between the review and the development for all the projects within the town, including the Conservation Commission or the Zoning Board of Appeals or the Planning Board. And there are towns that do that, rather than requiring each board to go out project by project and find a peer review particular project.
Well, isn't it a bit jurisdictional, though? And I'm asking Art this question because the Conservation Commission has jurisdiction over certain, the wetlands, et cetera, whereas the Planning Board has a sort of, and our example is exactly what just came up with the hearing preceding this hearing, where there was jurisdictional issues. And it was important that the Planning Board speak to the issues that came up with the driveway and all the other stuff we just listened to, versus just where the jurisdiction of the Conservation Commission. Seems to me it's working pretty well for Southampton.
But as I understand that last hearing you had, and I was not involved in that,
Uh-huh.
it sounds to me like the only reason he came before the planning board was because there were issues or problems created by the particular way he did his particular, it was a single family home?
No, because it was over the 4,000 square foot threshold. He had to go to the planning board anyway. Well, it had nothing to do with the issues.
Well, no, he had to get a wetlands, a stormwater management permit.
He
Right,
disrupted
that's what
greater,
the-
he
Yeah,
disrupted greater than the 40,000,
Yeah,
that's
he
why.
started the projects 2 years ago without any permits of any sort until he got stopped.
Well,
But it just, but if, just bear with me for a second. Yeah, let's just take this. Okay, let's take that project. That project did require a wetlands permit as well?
he did get an RDA, which is the least, demanding of our permits. It wasn't an NOI, it was just a simple RDA.
Right.
Then he came in with his excavator and cut every tree on the property.
Right.
And now it went into the wetlands, and now it required not only 3 enforcement orders, but it also required an NOI to straighten out the mess. Now this
Correct.
thing's going to cost him an absolute fortune, not just from the stormwater point of view. I mean, this guy's going to have to put in 51 trees in one section. You know how much, and the tree has to be 4 foot tall, and so on and so forth. And hundreds of pounds of seed, which is like $100 a pound. So this is going to cost a fortune, and that's why we're worried about having him come up and have a surety type involvement. Because I think he's going to skip out on this thing. This thing's going to cost $50K, if not more. This is a big deal. So that's what it started out as, a simple RDA, no problem, no anything, and then all of a sudden it's taken 2 years, and the guy just goes ahead and does it, and then it apologizes later and saying, "Oops, I didn't know." So that's. Sorry.
That's a good example. That's a very good example, and that's an example where there was a violation. The Conservation Commission probably gave an enforcement notice, I assume. You required that he file for order of conditions, notice of intent. And then I just wondered why, if you were going to that length, why you would not have included the overall stormwater management of that site when you were going in and issuing your order of conditions. Why that would be treated separately by the planning board.
Well, first thing, we haven't done the orders and conditions because we wanted to finish and see what the planning board was going to do as far as stormwater. Yeah. So that hasn't happened. And yeah, I mean, we're still in the midst of this thing. It's nowhere near complete.
Right. And did you use a peer review engineering consultant for this project?
Not yet. We're definitely going to. Yes, that's going to be one of the orders of conditions. We want to get our expert in, which he'll pay for, and go from there. Yeah.
But so don't you have an engineer on your engineer reviewing these plans that they're submitting for their order of conditions?
Well, I'm an engineer, but I'm not the right type. But no, we don't. But we will once we make that part of the order of the conditions.
Right. But what you're doing is you're going to be hiring an engineer to review their project while they're making the improvements. But you haven't had an engineer review the application to see whether it was correct.
Well, look, I mean, that's why we got a PE involved here. Damn it, that's his license. So I'm expecting, and that's why we've got a couple of PEs here that's going to look at this design and check it out also. So, yeah, we're going to look at it from the wetlands point of view and not from a stormwater point of view, because that's not our expertise and that's not our charge. Our charge is the wetlands.
Right, but that includes stormwater. That includes stormwater management.
No, it doesn't. It does not include stormwater management. That's not our expertise.
It may not be your
expertise is wetlands.
It may not be your expertise, but it is an element of the Wetlands Protection Act. As is, you know, as is floodplain.
Well, I think you better go back and, you know, look at the article, you know, 41 and go through it yourself, because I don't think you know what you're talking about.
Oh, well, that's okay. Yeah, I mean, you can sit here and insult me if you like, but in fact, you know, I've done over 1,000 special permits, over 100 subdivisions.
Yeah, well, so have I, you know, so, you know, we can go back and forth on this, but, you know, we don't have the expertise. We look at wetlands, we got wetland scientists, people of that nature, and that's who we look at those designs and sign it off. And this particular design that you, from the previous, had a wetland scientist work with the PE to come up with this design. He didn't go into all the recharge areas and so on and so forth, but that was part of this design too.
Well, let's not get bogged down. We've got to move on here. And
well, in light of that conversation, Paul, I guess I agree. I think the planning board is better apt relative to wetland applications to dealing with stormwater management than the Conservation Commission.
Thank you.
well, I can't see any way around it since we're named as the permitting authority throughout the entire bylaw or regulation. So, you know, we're named it. We have been doing it, and I think if there's permits coming through for various departments, that they start with the stormwater first, and then go back to the respective committee for their approval, knowing that it's passed muster with us. Isn't that what you prefer, Art?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Well, I'm certainly not in favor of rewriting this whole thing since all the work was done on it. I think maybe we go this route and explicitly leave the planning board as the permitting authority, and maybe down the road, if there's things that have got to be tweaked, so be it. But it's a starting point where we get it out of one set of regs and put it in another.
Which is where it ought to be.
Because I don't feel there's any major edits. We just made some minor changes in language that from our benefit and for what we were responsible for, but we weren't going to go contest any of the language in there about what was concerning highway or conservation or whomever else it might have affected. So
nor did I.
If someone wants to continue the conversation, fine, or we want to close the public hearing and move it forward and see what happens going up.
I'll throw in a comment that I think, just from my perspective, we have two goals. We need to comply with the MS4 permit, and I think our other goal is to streamline process so that we don't get projects that fall through the cracks. I think we all have that goal from all of our different respective commissions and boards and departments. So
you haven't streamlined the process. We
have or have not? Have not?
No, you have not, but I don't think it's fatal.
Well, that's good.
I mean, streamlining the process would be to have a single permit issued for a project. And that's what I'm suggesting. That's in the towns that I've worked for. That's how we've always done it. By incorporating the stormwater management permit and the stormwater management and the state requirements in the design of that particular project. We didn't treat it as a separate only that element as a separate standalone.
Wouldn't that, Larry, wouldn't that require, though, say if conservation was involved, like we were just talking or whatever, or ZBA, that would require joint meetings to streamline that process so that people didn't have to jump to 3 different committees.
Well, no, but my point is the last time I'm going to say it. My point is that whoever is issuing the underlying permit addresses the stormwater management issues. And they require that those stormwater management issues be done in accordance with the town's stormwater management bylaw that lists what the design requirements are and what the performance standards are. So that in fact, there's one permit application, one board or commission, one public hearing that the neighbors have to go to, and it's all done in just one permit, not two. That's all. And the reason we did it like that was exactly that reason was to streamline.
So here's my question. Given that recommendation by Larry, which is a good one if it's going to in fact streamline things, how does that change what we've already done? We've worked on this draft bylaw and we've worked on these draft regulations. Does that mean that the planning board should not be the stormwater authority, which is written throughout the bylaw? Or does that mean just leave it as it is and streamline the permitting process?
Well, no, because you have it written just like that. You have it written so that everything has to go through the planning board. You would have to make those modifications to the bylaw. I mean, if you're under a time gun to adopt these within a time frame or a deadline to get it adopted to comply with the MS4 requirements, then I would adopt it the way it's written. And then at some point you can go back and modify it if you have.
Well, we are at the 11th hour, and we would like to see this finalized. All of us that worked on this since like a year.
Yep.
And like Art said, I think we just want to get going on this. I don't know that I don't know. What does everybody else who worked on this for so long want to do? I think our consultants gave us the very best they could give. Maybe they are short of some of the experience you've had, but that's the way it went.
I agree with that. And as I told you, I've worked with both of those. I held them both in high regard.
Okay.
There's no other comments. If there are, speak now, because otherwise I'm going to call for a close the public hearing and move this along. Do I have a motion to close the public hearing?
I move we close the hearing.
I'm sorry, Paul. Before we close the hearing, I had one comment regarding, it was a section we had discussed previously. It had to do with project completion date. I don't know if I'm looking at the most current clean copy, but the section that discusses project completion date reads, the project shall begin within 3 years after issuance of the stormwater management permit. If the project is not completed within 3 years, so forth and so on. So I think that needs to read, the project shall be completed within 3 years after issuance of the stormwater management.
I thought we addressed that, Cindy.
I thought I changed it. So are you in the regulations or the bylaw?
This is in the regulations, Cindy. This is section, hold on, let me find it here. F.
Okay, I'm gonna, hold on.
Or do a keyword search for project completion.
Where's the keyword?
Control F, hit Control F.
Control F. Control F. I don't know where that is.
Top of your screen, Cindy.
Search, yeah.
Maybe right there.
Up on top.
Yep. See the search bar?
See, just put in the search bar for Cindy.
Or go to page 21, Cindy.
Oh, wait a minute. So what is the keyword?
Project completion.
That's not the right spot. Just go to page 21.
Oh, fine. She's got it. There you go. So the first sentence and the second sentence don't flow with each other.
All right, so what is it you want to say, Keith?
The project shall be complete within 3 years.
Shall be
Completed.
completed. Okay. All right. Is that right now?
I guess just ask now, is that consistent with is that consistent with the other permits that are going to be issued for that particular project?
Sure.
Okay.
I think we modeled that off after the subdivision regulations. It was a 3-year completion period from subdivision regulations.
Right. But you're also dealing with special permits. You're also dealing with orders of conditions.
Yep.
You just don't want to not be consistent.
You can make a note of that, Larry, for next time we visit our bylaws we're updating, just as a note. So I'll continue. We had a motion to, if there's no other edits, we had a motion to close the public hearing from Cindy. Do I get a second?
I'll second.
Motion has been made and seconded. And any other further discussion? All in favor? Keith?
Aye.
Paul?
Aye.
Cindy?
Aye.
Paul? Aye. All right, now a motion to accept the MS4 stormwater edits, the edited version that the planning board did, and refer it to town meeting in the near future. Do I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Cindy, I'm sorry you weren't there on the top of that.
I'm nervous. I'm nervous about it.
I was waiting for her.
God almighty, I thought you were going to jump all over that.
But I'd forgotten something.
So who made the motion, Keith?
Yeah, I gave Cindy what felt like 30 seconds.
I'm telling you. Oh,
Sorry.
asleep at the wheel there.
I am not asleep.
Motion's been made and seconded. Any other further discussion? All in favor? Paul?
Aye.
Keith?
Aye.
Cindy?
Aye.
Paul? Aye.
Yeah, right.
I
Right.
want to thank Cindy, Randall, Art, Ed, Paul Fergal was in on a couple of meetings there. Whoever else might have been. You guys had a lot of work ahead of you. I couldn't join you because of the time of day, but boy, was I glad I had a job at that point.
No way.
Well, you can either thank us all for doing that, or you can curse us now for doing it and sending it along to you and going through this.
No, it was an education. All right, thank you all very much.
It was for us too, I think.
Yeah, well, thank you all, and stay well.
Have a good night.
We just got a couple.
Thanks, Paul.
I'll go on to our next agenda item with a couple of small items here. I approved.
Paul, can I just?
Oh, go ahead, Larry.
Just one thing, and it has to do with the new permit application that I gave you a copy of.
Yeah.
I think it might be a good idea to set up a meeting with the planning board and maybe the chairman of the ZBA and maybe Ed and anybody else who is involved with issuing a zoning permit, so that you can all adopt that and put it into work.
Yeah. Ron, are you still on?
Yeah, actually, Ron's got it, and we're supposed to be using it. So.
Yeah, and
Yeah, Paul, I'm on still. Paul, can you hear me?
yeah,
Here, hold on.
that zoning application we were just referring to that handles all kinds of permits should be instituted. Because the select board approved that, right, Ed?
Yeah, I think.
Yeah, and I gave it to Ron, and he's got it. So.
It's like
We should be
a zoning determination.
Utilizing it.
No,
The zoning application.
It's not
It's
a
a
Westfield thing then.
no,
Yeah.
it's a special permit it's an application for a special permit, for a variance, for a
Okay,
site,
yeah.
for a subdivision,
So-
anything relative to a permit required under, not a building permit, but a permit required under the zoning bylaw.
Yeah.
So anybody who issues one, which is basically ZBA, planning board, and the select board, need to adopt it. You're the building inspector, right?
I'm the building inspector.
Yep.
Right, okay. You don't have to adopt.
All right.
Okay,
That's the one that you said looks awful lot like the one Westfield uses.
I did say that, correct.
Yeah, that's
maybe
actually correct.
I think Larry stole it from them.
I think so.
Yeah. Yeah, or maybe Larry wrote it for them.
I was just going to say probably Larry wrote it for him.
Oh, dear. There you go. All right.
And then the second thing,
All right,
I
Paul,
think
bye.
we need,
Good night.
see ya.
Take care.
And the second. There it
got
is. And the second thing I think would be good to talk with them about would be the idea of hiring a engineering firm to do all of your peer reviews.
Well, we had
So you
that
don't-
discussion a couple of years back. In fact, I think we're due that right now. We're using VHB for some odds and ends. So I think,
I know they would be one who would be interested in putting in a proposal for it.
yeah, right.
They do it. There are a number of towns that do this already. I think Palmer, and I think because I talked with John about this a number of times when he was the chair.
How many firms would you send it out to, in your opinion?
Well, I would leave that up to your procurement officer, who I think is Ed.
Yeah.
You're right.
I think I think you're going to need at least 3, but my guess is it's going to be a dollar amount that it might trigger a more formal.
Yeah. And would you recommend just one firm or picking 2?
I would recommend one firm, and the deal is that firm works for us, and that firm does not submit applications or projects. I mean, if they,
Okay, that makes sense.
it wouldn't preclude them
Yeah,
from
that
like.
Go ahead.
Yeah, no, go ahead.
Okay, it wouldn't preclude them from like applying to the town to do a road project, but it would preclude them from submitting a subdivision plan for somebody or a special permit application for somebody. And that's sort of the quid pro.
Yeah. That's basically why I was asking if you would pick 2 because of the conflict of interest. But if you do it in that way and make those limitations, it makes sense with a 1. Yeah.
Exactly. I mean, yeah, that way there are no conflicts of interest.
Right.
And if I understand it correctly, you can do the procurement for 1 year, and I believe you can extend it for 2 additional years. So you could, in fact, have them for 3 years.
Right.
But it just makes a whole lot of sense in terms of, the planning board not having to scramble to find an engineering firm to do a review for a particular project. You've already got it. When the application comes in, you know who to send it to automatically. And it also makes a whole lot of sense in terms of continuity to having one engineering firm reviewing all your projects.
Ed, is that done?
I agree with that.
Is that done on a fiscal year basis, or can that be done anytime?
It can be done anytime.
Yeah, you're gonna probably have to budget for it.
All right. We'll have to discuss that on an agenda some one of these days down the road. Thank you.
Very good. That's all I got.
All right. Moving on, the next agenda item is a building permit that I approved earlier this week for David Hardy for Lot 3 on Fitch Farm Way. It was well under the 40,000 square foot threshold for stormwater, so I signed off on that. I have 2 warrants, one for VHB for the ongoing inspection of Gill Farm for $2,070. And then I have one for the Daily Hampshire Gazette for public hearings we have had for $518.30. So I would ask for motions to pay those bills.
I move to pay those bills.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Cindy and Keith,
Yes.
all in favor? Keith?
Aye.
Paul?
Aye.
Cindy?
Aye.
Paul? Aye. That's all I have. That's all we need.
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks so much, you guys, for hanging in there. I know that first project was a nightmare, but hopefully that'll straighten out. But this guy, I think he's going to really have to be, somebody's going to have to be on him continually. I didn't realize from Art it's going to cost that much for him to remediate that place up there, huh?
I hope he doesn't run away. If he's going to have to.
One thing I didn't understand was who dictates he's got to put trees back?
Conscom?
Conservation Commission, because
Wetland replication planning.
But the wetland replication doesn't extend over his entire property. The wetland application is limited to a confined area. It doesn't spill over to his whole site. So, with respect to what Art was saying,
yeah, I wouldn't. I doubt it's 50 trees. I think there was some exaggeration there.
Yeah, I don't buy that number that Art met.
That was when he said 50 trees. I said, ooh.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, a tree's not that hard to. I mean, that's a cheap.
Can I ask quick? I have a very quick question of the board here. This came from one of the assessors who called me today. It was from April. When we approve an A&R, we approve it as an appropriate building lot. Isn't that correct? Isn't that the reason for an A&R?
No. Well, as a building lot, but yeah, I guess that's to answer your question simply.
Okay, so this came right out of the fact that we approved 3 A&Rs for the subdivision of the Carol Goulet property up on Fomer Road. Remember that not too long ago?
Yeah.
And the second question, which I really had not heard of this before, April remembered if you recall, that was an odd-shaped approval lot.
Yep.
Okay. So is there a rule or a bylaw that says that if there's a specific amount of property on the road that meets our standards, the specific length of the road, the frontage, thank you, that there can be no shrinking of the property of less than 80% of that frontage that's approved. Is there any kind of I'm not familiar with that at all. Is there any kind of a bylaw or review that requires that it never gets any skinnier than 80% of the frontage that is the minimum standard?
Isn't the minimum standard the zoning size for that district?
Yeah, the zoning size.
So you can't exceed or be less than the zoning size for that particular parcel. And going back to your original question, actually, what I wanted to say is no, it doesn't have to be, it could be an existing lot that could have an addition to it that you're not creating a new lot that would require an A&R. So that doesn't necessarily imply you're going to be creating a new lot.
You're right in that regard where they're adding additional acreage, yeah.
They didn't add additional acreage. It was a one lot that was subdivided.
So if my neighbor wants to convey a part of his property that's 20 feet by 300 feet, he can do it as long as it's not violating his frontage for zoning.
Yeah, it can't make his smaller, right.
Correct. What you're doing is you're not creating a building lot, you're just conveying a parcel between two, or part of a parcel between two properties.
Right, because you can't make yours non-conforming, right?
Correct, or his non-conforming, or whatever.
But I don't know anything about that 80% thing you're talking about, Cindy.
I hadn't heard of it either. April seemed to remember that from something, and I wasn't aware of that. So
it might be in other towns, but not the way we've got it.
Okay. All right.
We do have a cluster development, but that's more under subdivision control, subdivision regulations that allows for smaller lot sizes. But that would not apply to A&Rs on existing streets, on existing town roads.
Okay, so even though this particular property was in fact subdivided, it wasn't a subdivision. That's
Correct.
the difference? Okay.
Yeah. Approval
right.
not required is approval not required under subdivision control law. So even though the lot is split or subdivided, because it provides frontage on existing town roads, it doesn't fall under subdivision control law.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Thank you, everybody.
Is that it? Can I motion to adjourn?
Hey, John, you're going to be home tomorrow? I can't do it tomorrow afternoon, like Friday afternoon? What's a good time?
Probably not, because we're traveling back and forth to the Sturbridge area every day to help our son with his house he just bought. I've got to drop off stuff to you in the planning board box tomorrow. Do you want to just leave it there and I'll pick it up sometime?
Yeah, or do you want me?
Or I've got a bin on my porch. You can put it in there if you want.
Yeah, where is it, on the front porch?
It's on the side porch. It's an old tobacco bin. You'll see it there.
Yeah, all right. I'll do that.
Okay.
Good. All right.
I sent you an email a little earlier in the meeting that responding to what you asked me for.
Thank you.
Okay.
Do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved. Yeah.
Sorry, Cindy, you're too late.
No, I said that Keith already did that, and I second
I'm
it.
going to second my motion. Adjourn. Good night.
All in favor? Aye. Thank you all. Thanks a lot for hanging in there, everybody. Good night.
Happy New Year.
Right.
Bye-bye.
Happy New Year.